She didn't flinch when the first round cracked past her ear. Most people would have ducked. Some would have frozen. But she only breathed out, slowly, like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact sound. The desert around Devil's Ridge had gone quiet in that unnatural way, too quiet for a place that was supposed to be empty. No birds, no wind, no movement except the heat shimmering off broken concrete. Kira Dalton lay behind a collapsed wall, the grit biting into her forearms, the weight of the M24 familiar and steady across her chest. Somewhere behind her, men were shouting, orders overlapping, panic bleeding through the radio. She ignored all of it, because fear had a sound. And this wasn't fear. This was confirmation. Her eye found the scope, the world narrowed, the ridge line snapped into clarity, a rooftop, a shadow, a man leaning into a rifle that wasn't supposed to be there. She didn't fire. Not yet. Her heartbeat slowed like her grandmother had taught her. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. She remembered being 12 years old, knuckles white around a rifle that weighed too much, her grandmother's voice calm behind her. Don't rush the truth. Let it come to you. The truth was simple now. They were surrounded. The first shot of the ambush slammed into the dirt near the general, then another. Then a burst of automatic fire ripped across the compound, turning dust into shrapnel. Soldiers scattered. Some reached cover. Some didn't. A lieutenant went down hard, blood already spreading dark into the sand. That was when the general shouted it. Who gave her that rifle? Kira didn't look back. She chambered around. The sound was small, almost polite, a quiet metallic click that meant everything had just changed. She found her first target, too exposed, too confident. 60 meters. Easy math. She adjusted without thinking, squeezed, and watched the man fold backward out of the fight like a broken hinge. 1. The radio erupted with confusion. Someone was asking where the shots were coming from. Someone else was screaming for a medic. Kira worked the bolt again, smooth, practiced, like she'd done it 10,000 times before. Because she had. They just hadn't been watching. Another hostile leaned out from an alley, waiting for soldiers to break cover. Kira waited with him, let him commit, let him believe. Then she ended it. 2. She shifted position, crawling low, dust coating her cheek, her mind empty of everything except angles and wind. A third target appeared on the north ridge, farther now. Professional. This one knew what he was doing. So did she. They fired almost at the same time. His round passed close enough to move her hair. Hers found his chest. 3. Only then did she feel it, the weight, the awareness, the truth crashing in. Everyone could see her now. The general stared. The master sergeant beside him went very still. He knew that shooting style. He'd seen it once before, decades ago, in another desert. She's Wade Dalton's daughter, he said quietly. The general didn't answer. He was watching history repeat itself, and somehow improve. By the time the firing stopped, 9 enemy contractors lay dead. 17 minutes, 0 friendly casualties. The silence afterward felt heavier than the gunfire. Soldiers moved differently now, slower, careful, like the ground itself had changed. Kira stayed prone, scanning, refusing to relax. When the order finally came to stand down, her legs shook as she rose. Adrenaline left behind a hollow ache. The general walked toward her. His face was unreadable. 9 confirmed, she said before he could ask. He exhaled slowly. Where did you learn to shoot like that? She held his gaze. My father wrote it down. My grandmother made me practice. The master sergeant swallowed. He warned me about this day. And just like that, the lie Kira had been living for 8 months died in the desert. The convoy didn't go home after Devil's Ridge. It went north. Because the ambush wasn't a mistake, it was a message. By nightfall, the truth had started to surface. buried programs, erased missions, men who were never supposed to survive and were punished for it when they did. The Phantom Initiative. 12 snipers, 11 dead, 1 still breathing. And the man who had ordered it all was still free. Kira listened as the general and the last phantom spoke in low voices, names spilling out like ghosts. Car accidents, suicides, fires, all too clean, all too convenient. Her father hadn't crashed. He'd been silenced. That knowledge sat in her chest like a second heart, heavy, angry, alive. They rolled through the night toward Fort Wuka, the desert swallowing their headlights. Somewhere behind them, the past was catching up. Somewhere ahead, the truth waited in a box buried behind concrete and lies. Kira cleaned her rifle in silence while the master sergeant taught her things her father never had time to write down. Not because he didn't know them, because he hoped she'd never need them. But hope doesn't stop bullets. At Sentinel Ridge, she spotted the ambush before it happened. Terrain too perfect, silence too loud, 18 hostiles setting up heavy weapons above a narrow pass. She didn't ask for permission. She asked for 2 minutes. When the convoy broke through without a single loss, the master sergeant looked at her with something like awe. Your father would have been proud. She shook her head. He would have worried. And she was right. At Fort Wuka, the trap finally snapped shut. Gunfire tore into the convoy. A trusted voice on the radio betrayed them. Kira ran toward the sound of it and found the last phantom bleeding into the dirt, shot in the back by a man who'd worn the same uniform. She tried to save him. He stopped her. This is where I get off, he whispered. You finish it. When he died, something in her hardened, not into anger but resolve. Grief could wait, justice couldn't. She went into the building alone. Silent corridors, 2 guards, controlled shots, a hidden panel. A safe opened with numbers her father had written decades ago, knowing she'd one day need them. The truth fit in a metal case. The man who'd betrayed them tried to stop her. She didn't threaten him. She didn't beg. She told him the truth. And let him choose. Outside, helicopters thundered in. A silver-haired man stepped out smiling, the architect of it all. The one who'd ordered her father's death like a budget adjustment. He laughed when the general tried to arrest him. Until the sniper on the roof fired. Kira found him through the scope. Yuri Koff, the ghost, the man who'd staged her father's murder and walked away. They dueled across concrete and wind and memory. Shot for shot, breath for breath, he was good. She was better. When he fell, the desert felt lighter. Ashford was arrested. The archive went public, trials followed, convictions stuck. The world learned the truth too late, but learned it all the same. 6 months later, Kira stood before a black granite memorial with 12 names etched into it. Her father, among them. The last phantoms, too. She was a sergeant now, an instructor, a quiet presence on a range where young men and women learned how to make impossible shots for the right reasons. A recruit once asked her why she never talked about heroism. Kira smiled. Because heroes talk. But dignity doesn't. Sometimes it simply acts. Why did the convoy keep moving north when every instinct told her it should? Kira sat in the third vehicle, knees braced against steel, the desert rolling past like a slow-burning memory she couldn't outrun. The M24 rested across her lap now without comment, without judgment. No one questioned why she carried it anymore. They'd seen what happened when she didn't hesitate. Still, silence followed her. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that weighs. The kind that says you've crossed a line, and there's no going back. The radio crackled with low, controlled voices. Coordinates, fuel checks, casualty updates. Everything sounded normal, but nothing was. Devil's Ridge was already behind them, yet it clung to her like dust in her lungs. 9 faces she'd never know. 9 lives she'd ended to keep others breathing. She told herself what her grandmother always had. Count what you save, not what you take. But that didn't make the taking disappear. Across from her, Master Sergeant Cole Brennan cleaned his rifle with methodical care. His hands didn't shake, his eyes didn't wander, but every so often he looked at her, not directly, not obviously, like he was seeing something he hadn't expected to see again. A ghost with her father's eyes. "You did good back there," he said finally, voice low enough that only she could hear. Kira didn't answer. Praise felt wrong, heavy, like it didn't belong to her. "I mean it," Brennan continued. "Most people freeze the first time bullets come at them like that. You didn't." She swallowed. "I didn't have time." Brennan nodded once. He understood. Time was a luxury soldiers rarely had. The convoy slowed as the terrain shifted, desert flattening into long, open stretches that offered nowhere to hide. Kira watched the horizon, scanning without thinking, her mind splitting itself between the present and the past. She remembered being 8 years old, sitting on the floor of her father's study, touching pages she wasn't supposed to touch, ink smudged by sweat and sand, numbers that looked meaningless then. She remembered asking her grandmother if her father had been scared. Her grandmother had taken a long time to answer. "He was," she'd said, "but he went anyway." That was the part no one ever talked about. Fear didn't make you weak. It made you human. What you did next, that was the measure. The general's voice cut through the radio. "We'll halt in 30, short resupply, eyes open." Kira stiffened. Something in his tone told her this wasn't routine. The vehicle stopped near a shallow rise. Soldiers dismounted, stretching legs, checking weapons, pretending they weren't replaying Devil's Ridge in their heads. Kira stepped out last, scanning automatically, her senses tuned too tight. Brennan joined her on the ridge line. "You saw it early," he said, "the ambush." "Yes." "Why didn't you push harder?" She met his eyes. "I did, they didn't listen." He didn't argue. "That's something you'll have to get used to," he said quietly, "being right too early." They stood there in silence, wind tugging at their uniforms, the desert indifferent to all of it. "Your father used to say the same thing," Brennan added. "That command never hears the warning until the shooting starts." Her chest tightened. "You knew him well." Brennan's jaw flexed. "Well enough." She wanted to ask more, wanted to demand answers, but some truths needed the right moment to breathe. That moment came sooner than she expected. The general called them into the lead vehicle. The air inside was thick with heat and tension. Maps spread across the table. Red circles marked locations that shouldn't have mattered anymore. "Devil's Ridge wasn't random," the general said. "Those weren't insurgents." Kira already knew. She'd seen the discipline, the spacing, the way they withdrew when things went wrong. "They were contractors," Brennan said. "Ex-military, paid, trained." "By who?" Kira asked. The general didn't answer right away. He looked at Brennan instead. "Phantom Initiative," Brennan said quietly. The words landed hard. Kira felt something shift inside her, like a lock clicking open. "My father wrote about that," she said. "Not by name, just missions that didn't exist." The general exhaled slowly. "Then you know why this stays contained." "No," Kira replied. "I know why it got men killed." Silence followed, not hostile, just heavy. Brennan finally spoke. 12 of us, scout snipers, off-the-books operations, targets we were told mattered more than rules." "And after?" she asked. "And after," Brennan said, "we became liabilities." The general nodded. 11 are dead, accidents, suicides, fires, all clean." Kira felt cold despite the heat. "My father was number one." "Yes," the general said, "he was." The truth didn't hurt the way she'd imagined. It settled instead, found its place, confirmed what she'd always known. "Then Fort Wuka," she said, "that's not about extraction." "No," Brennan replied, It's about proof. The convoy rolled again as the sun dipped low, painting the desert in bruised oranges and reds. Kira leaned her head back against the metal wall, exhaustion creeping in now that the adrenaline had nowhere to go. She thought about Lieutenant Pierce, how young he'd looked bleeding into the sand, how close they'd come to losing him, how easily that could have been any of them. "Do you ever get used to it?" she asked suddenly. Brennan glanced at her. "To what?" "Knowing you'll live when someone else doesn't." He considered the question carefully. "No, you just learn how to carry it without letting it decide who you are." She nodded. That made sense. Night fell as they pushed deeper into open territory. The stars were sharp and indifferent overhead. Kira took first watch when they stopped again, lying prone with her rifle, scanning the darkness. This was where she felt most steady, where thought slowed, where the world simplified into distance and intent. She didn't notice Brennan approach until he was beside her. "You hide it well," he said. "Hide what?" "The weight." She adjusted her position slightly. "If I don't, it slows me down." He smiled faintly. "Your father said the same thing." That time the name didn't hurt, it grounded her. "Why didn't he tell me," she asked quietly, "about any of this?" "Because he wanted you free," Brennan replied. "And because once you know, you can't unknow it." She watched the horizon through her scope. "Freedom doesn't come from ignorance." "No," he agreed, "it comes from choice." A sound carried on the wind, distant, wrong. Kira stiffened, movement east. Brennan raised his optics. "I see it." They waited, counted, confirmed. The convoy shifted formations without panic, controlled, ready. The contact never came. But the message was clear. They were being watched. As dawn approached, Kira felt something unfamiliar settle over her. Not fear, not anger. Clarity. Her life before this felt distant now. The pretending, the missed shots on purpose, the smallness she'd worn like armor. That armor was gone. She didn't know how this would end, didn't know who would survive, didn't know if justice would feel like enough when it came. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not look away. She would not stay quiet. And she would finish what had been started. Because sometimes, the world doesn't change with speeches or medals. Sometimes, it changes when the person everyone underestimated finally decides to act. Why did the silence before Fort Wuka feel heavier than the firefights that came before it? Kira felt it long before anyone said a word. The convoy moved slower now, headlights dimmed, engines humming like restrained animals. Night wrapped around them, thick and watchful. This wasn't the kind of darkness that simply hid things. It waited. She sat in the turret, scanning through binoculars, every nerve awake. The desert ahead looked empty, but experience had taught her that emptiness was often a lie told by patient killers. Below her, the general studied a tablet lit in cold blue. Brennan rode in the third vehicle again, silent, thoughtful, like a man walking through memories he never asked to revisit. "You feel it too, don't you?" Brennan said over the intercom. "Yes," Kira replied, no hesitation. "This place is a funnel," he said. "Once we enter, there's only one way out." She adjusted her grip. "Then they'll hit us before we reach it." Brennan didn't disagree. The road narrowed as the terrain shifted into jagged rock and shallow passes. Perfect choke points, perfect killing ground. Kira's breathing slowed, her vision sharpened. Fear tried to rise, but she pressed it down, not by force but by focus. Fear was loud. Focus was quiet. She caught the first sign at the edge of her vision. A flicker, metal reflecting starlight where it shouldn't. "Stop the convoy," she said into the radio. "Now." The general didn't ask why. He trusted her instincts after Devil's Ridge. The vehicles halted. Soldiers dismounted smoothly, weapons up, spreading into defensive positions. Kira climbed down, already moving uphill with Brennan. Loose gravel shifted under their boots as they climbed for higher ground. From the ridge, the truth revealed itself. 18 silhouettes, heavy weapons, discipline, patience. Professional, Brennan muttered. Ashford didn't cut corners. Kira counted them again. 4 machine guns, interlocking fire. They're waiting for us to commit. We won't, Brennan said. Not yet. The general's voice came through tight but calm. Options. Brennan looked at Kira. She already knew what he was thinking. Impossible odds, limited time. Give me 2 minutes, she said. We slow them down, you move the convoy. Silence. Then 2 minutes, make them count. She didn't feel heroic. She felt tired, tired of being hunted, tired of ghosts deciding who lived and who didn't. She settled into position beside Brennan. 2 rifles, 1 ridge, a decision that would either save everyone or end here. On your count, Brennan said. Kira inhaled slowly, found the first machine gunner in her scope, 800 yards, wind shifting, mirage dancing. Her father's voice surfaced uninvited. Don't fight the wind, listen to it. 3. She adjusted. 2. The gunner leaned forward, feeding a belt. 1. She fired. The shot felt clean, final. The gunner collapsed. Brennan fired half a heartbeat later. Another crew dropped. Chaos erupted across the ridge. Men scrambling, shouting, trying to understand how they'd lost control so fast. Kira worked the bolt, found the second machine gun position, fired again. Another down. Brennan matched her, controlled, ruthless, beautiful in its precision. They're breaking, he said. Not yet, Kira replied. She shifted targets, found a man giving orders, pointing, trying to reassert control. She took him out. That was the moment it changed. The ambush collapsed into retreat. Some ran, some fired blindly, none advanced. Below them, engines roared. The convoy surged forward, punching through the pass while confusion reigned above. 14 enemies neutralized, 0 friendly losses. When it was over, Kira lowered her rifle and exhaled. Only then did she realize her hands were trembling. Brennan looked at her, not as a superior, not as a legend, but as someone who understood exactly what this cost. You all right? He asked. I will be, she said, later. They rejoined the convoy. No cheers, no congratulations, just quiet respect, the kind earned, not given. Fort Wuka appeared hours later, a concrete scar against the night. Condemned, abandoned, too quiet. This is wrong, Kira said as soon as they stopped. The general raised a fist. Hold. Gunfire erupted before anyone could move. Rounds slammed into the lead vehicle. Glass shattered. A driver slumped. Muzzle flashes erupted from windows, rooftops, angles they hadn't cleared yet. Ambush. Kira moved on instinct, sprinting toward cover, returning fire. She spotted Brennan moving left, and then saw the flash behind him. A single shot. Brennan staggered, fell. No, she whispered, already running. She reached him as bullets snapped overhead. Blood soaked through his uniform. Too much, too fast. Stay with me, she said, pressing down, calling for a medic that couldn't reach them. He smiled faintly. Figures, I'd go out on someone else's battlefield. You're not going anywhere, she said, voice breaking despite herself. He grabbed her wrist, strength fatting. The archive, 3rd floor, northwest corner, hidden panel. We'll get it together. No, he whispered, this is yours now. His eyes found hers, clear, certain. You're better than we ever were. Then he was gone. Something inside Kira broke and hardened at the same time. She stood slowly, picked up her rifle. The grief didn't disappear, it stepped aside. Actual, she said into the radio. Brennan is down, archive is inside, I'm going in. Negative, the general replied. Too many hostiles. I'm not waiting, Kira said and cut the channel. She moved through shadows like she'd been trained to, slipped into the building through a forgotten service door. Inside smelled like dust and old secrets. Two guards' quiet shots controlled. Third floor, northwest corner. The safe opened with numbers her father had written decades ago. The past unlocking the present. She took the case. On her way out, a familiar voice stopped her. Sullivan. Gun raised, hands shaking. Drop it, he said. She didn't. She looked at him, not with anger but certainty. You're not a killer, she said. You're just afraid. Something in him cracked. He lowered the gun. She walked past him without another word. Outside, helicopters thundered in. Ashford had arrived. And with him, the man who'd killed her father. Kira raised her rifle. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about ending the hunt. And she was done running. Why did her hands finally start shaking? Only after she stepped back into the open. The night air outside Fort Wuka felt sharper than before, colder somehow, as if the desert itself understood what had just been taken from it. Kira moved low along the concrete edge, the metal case pressed tight against her ribs, every breath measured. Gunfire cracked across the compound, lighting the darkness in violent flashes. Shadows ran. Men shouted. Orders collided and dissolved into noise. Inside her, everything was quiet. Too quiet. That silence scared her more than the bullets. She dropped behind an overturned vehicle, slid the case underneath, and brought the M24 back into her shoulder. The weight of it steadied her. This rifle had become more than a tool. It was a promise she had no right to break. Across the compound, helicopters thundered as they touched down. The rotors tore at the air, flattening dust and debris, announcing authority where there should have been none. Kira didn't need binoculars to know who had arrived. She felt him before she saw him. Victor Ashford stepped onto the ground like a man who owned it. Civilian jacket, calm stride, no helmet, no urgency. Men like him never hurried. They believed the world bent eventually toward money, toward power, toward them. Her jaw tightened. The general's voice came through the radio, strained but controlled. Ashford, this ends now. You're surrounded. Ashford laughed. The sound carried thin and sharp across the compound. Surrounded by what? A few loyal soldiers and one angry girl with a rifle. Kira flinched not at the insult but at the truth buried inside it. She was angry, but anger didn't guide her hands. Training did. Memory did. Loss did. Then a single shot rang out from above. The general went down. Time fractured. Kira swung her rifle upward, already searching rooftops, angles, shadows. She found him in less than a second. Yuri Kov. The ghost her grandmother had warned her about without ever saying his name. The man whose work left no fingerprints, no witnesses, no doubt. He moved like a professional, slow, deliberate, unhurried, because he had never needed speed to win. Their scopes aligned. For an instant, the world shrank to a thin glass circle and a pair of eyes that had never once regretted anything. Kov fired first. The round cracked against concrete inches from Kira's head, spraying fragments across her cheek. Pain bloomed hot and sharp, but she didn't move, didn't blink. She fired back. Missed by inches. The distance was brutal, wind shifting, light uneven. He was good. So was she. They moved almost in rhythm now. Fire, shift, breathe, fire again. Each shot stripped away another layer of the world until nothing existed but physics and will. Her hands were bleeding. She hadn't noticed when the fragments tore skin. She didn't care. Her father's voice lived in her head now, not loud, not commanding. Calm, patient. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Kov repositioned, trying to draw her out. He wanted her angry, wanted her to rush. That was how he'd always won. She didn't give it to him. Instead, she remembered a passage from the journal, a shot her father had written about only once, a shot he'd never tried again, not because it failed, but because it cost too much concentration to attempt twice. She scanned the environment, calculated angles not at the man, at the space around him. A steel support beam caught the edge of her vision, scarred, angled, exposed just enough. Her heart slowed. This would either work, or it would end everything. Cough fired again. The round punched through her cover, tearing fabric, grazing skin. She sucked in a breath, steadied, and took the shot. The bullet struck the beam exactly where she'd aimed. Sparks flared. The round deflected, altered just enough to curve around the concrete pillar Koff thought protected him. Through the scope, she saw it land. Once. She fired again, insurance. The man who had ended her father's life fell silently into the dust. For a moment, Kira couldn't breathe. Not from relief, not from triumph. From the sudden absence of something that had haunted her for as long as she could remember. The firefight collapsed around her. Contractors dropped weapons. Some fled. Others froze. Authority drained out of them like air from a punctured lung. She stood and moved forward, rifle steady, case retrieved, every step deliberate. Ashford saw her coming. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by something like amusement. "You must be Wade's daughter," he said. "You have his timing." She stopped a few feet away. "You ordered his death," she said. "Business decision," Ashford replied smoothly. He knew too much. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The general stepped between them, blood seeping through a field dressing. "Stand down, Dalton." She hesitated. Everything in her screamed that this man would never truly pay. That men like him always found loopholes, excuses, quiet deals. But she also remembered her father's handwriting, steady, careful. "We don't do this because it's clean. We do it because it's right." She lowered the rifle. Ashford smiled, small, confident. The cuff snapped shut moments later. The case was handed off. The truth moved faster than bullets now, copied, transmitted, duplicated beyond anyone's reach. By dawn, it was already too big to bury again. But victory didn't feel like she'd imagined. Brennan was still dead. Her father was still gone. 6 months later, the air at Fort Benning shimmered with summer heat. Kira stood at attention before a black granite memorial, 12 names carved deep enough to last longer than lies. She traced one with her finger. "Wade Dalton." "I did what you asked," she whispered. "I just wish you'd been there to see it." Behind her, Boots approached. A young woman, nervous, hopeful, stood clutching a folder. "They said you'd be here," the girl said. "I want to be a sniper." Kira studied her, saw the same hunger, the same doubt. "Why?" she asked. "Because I don't want to be invisible," the girl replied. "And because someone has to stand when others can't." Kira nodded slowly. "Then you'll learn," she said, "but not how to kill." The girl frowned. "Then what?" "How to carry the weight," Kira said, "and still choose to protect." She looked back at the memorial one last time. Some battles end with noise. Some with silence. And some with someone quietly deciding that the world will not take another good person without answering for it. Why did the quiet months afterward feel harder than the firefights? Kira hadn't expected that. She'd imagined sleep would come easier once the shooting stopped, that the faces would fade, that silence would feel earned. Instead, the quiet pressed in on her at night, heavy and unresolved, like a question no one wanted to ask out loud. She lay awake in her quarters, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant rhythm of the bass, boots on concrete, engines starting, doors closing. Life continuing, always continuing. And yet, something inside her hadn't caught up. During the day, she became efficient, precise, almost distant. Reports praised her composure. Psych evaluations called her remarkably stable. Promotions were hinted at, then quietly shelved, then hinted at again. She didn't ask. She already knew the cost of knowing too much. The young recruit from the memorial, Lena, found her 3 weeks later. "I was told to shadow you," Lena said, standing too straight, eyes bright with nerves and hope. Kira studied her for a moment. The eagerness, the untested belief that clarity always followed courage. "Shadowing isn't learning," Kira replied. "You'll walk beside me, that's different." Lena nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me that," Kira said. "It creates distance." They trained quietly. No speeches, no dramatics. Kira focused on fundamentals: breathing, patience, observation, how to listen without reacting. "Why don't you shoot more?" Lena asked one afternoon as they lay prone, overlooking a dry valley. "Because shooting is the end," Kira replied. "Most mistakes happen before that." Lena absorbed this in silence. Sometimes Kira caught herself watching the girl when she wasn't supposed to, making sure she drank enough water, adjusted her sling correctly, didn't carry the weight alone. She hated that instinct. It felt like temptation. One evening, a sealed envelope appeared on Kira's bunk. No return address. Inside was a single line of text and a set of coordinates. The truth didn't end with Ashford. Her chest tightened. She folded the paper carefully, as if it might cut her if she wasn't gentle enough. That night, she dreamed of Brennan for the first time since Fort Wuka. He stood at the edge of the desert, just out of reach. "You knew," she told him in the dream. He smiled sadly. "I hoped you wouldn't have to." The coordinates led to a quiet airstrip 2 days later. No insignia, no fanfare, just a man waiting beside an unmarked aircraft. He didn't introduce himself. "They're calling it closure," he said instead. "I call it containment." "What do you want from me?" Kira asked. "To listen," the man replied, "and decide." Inside the aircraft, files covered the table. Names, dates, operations that never officially existed. Phantom Initiative hadn't died with Ashford. It had molted, changed shape, found new hands. "You're not asking me to shoot anyone," Kira said. "No," the man replied. "We're asking you to watch." She almost laughed, almost. "That's how it starts," she said, "and how it never ends." He met her gaze steadily. "You already know it never ends." She did. That was the problem. She took the files back to her quarters and didn't open them for 3 days. On the fourth night, she finally did, and felt the familiar tightening in her chest. This time, though, something else rose with it. Resolve. She didn't confront command, didn't make demands, didn't burn bridges. She learned instead how information moved, where silence gathered, who benefited from shadows. She became patient. Weeks turned into months. Lena improved, sharpened, learned when to speak and when not to. One afternoon, she made a near-perfect call on wind and distance. Kira allowed herself a small smile. "Good," she said. "Now forget it." Lena blinked. "Forget it." "Yes," Kira replied. "Confidence fades, discipline stays." The day Lena asked about Brennan, Kira almost didn't answer. "What happens when you lose someone because of what you do?" Lena asked quietly. Kira thought of the ridge, the blood, the unfinished sentences. "You don't get over it," she said. "You get honest with it." "How?" "You stop pretending it didn't change you." That night, Kira stood alone at the firing range long after it closed. She fired once, then stopped. One shot was enough. The call came just before dawn. Quiet insertion, no backup, no acknowledgement. Kira closed her eyes. Some roads didn't allow turning back. She packed lightly, left no notes, only instructions for Lena, training schedules, references, reminders written in careful ink. The mission wasn't about elimination. It was about confirmation, proof that Phantom still breathed. She watched from a distance, listened, recorded, waited. And when the moment came, the moment where a single bullet could have ended everything, she didn't take the shot. Instead, she transmitted the data. Sometimes restraint was louder than violence. When she returned, the base looked the same, but she was. The general met her privately. "You've made yourself inconvenient," he said. She nodded. "I learned from the best." He studied her for a long moment. "What do you want?" Kira thought about the rifle, about the girl learning patience, about her father's journal, now worn soft at the edges. "I want the next generation to never need to do what I did," she said. The general exhaled slowly. "That's a heavy want." "I can carry it," she replied. As she walked back across the base, the sun rising at her back, Kira felt something unfamiliar. Not peace. Purpose. Because sometimes strength isn't in pulling the trigger. Sometimes it's in choosing to become the quiet weight that keeps others from ever having to. Why did the final decision feel heavier than every shot she had ever taken? Kira stood alone before sunrise, the base still half asleep, the sky caught between night and morning. That in-between hour had always felt honest to her. No shadows pretending to be harmless. No light pretending everything was fine. She liked it there. The rifle rested against the bench beside her, untouched. For the first time since Fort Wuka, she hadn't brought it to aim, only to remember. Boots approached behind her, slow and uncertain. Lena stopped a few steps back. "I was told you're leaving." Kira didn't turn. "I was told a lot of things once. Most of them weren't true." "But this is," Lena said, "not a question." "Yes." Silence stretched between them, fragile but not awkward. Kira had learned the difference. "Are you coming back?" Lena asked. Kira finally looked at her, really looked. The girl's hands no longer shook. Her stance was steady. Her eyes still held fear, but it was balanced now by thought. "I don't know," Kira said honestly, "and anyone who tells you they do is lying." Lena nodded slowly. "Is it wrong that I'm scared?" Kira shook her head. "It would be wrong if you were." They stood there as the horizon began to glow, pale, soft, earned. Lena hesitated, then spoke again. "If they ask me to do something I don't believe in, how do I know when to say no?" The question hit deeper than any bullet ever had. Kira took a long breath. When the mission asks you to trade your name for silence, when it asks you to forget who pays the price, when it tells you the truth is too dangerous to survive. She paused. "That's when you say no." Lena swallowed, "Even if it costs everything." Kira's voice softened, "Especially then." A transport vehicle waited at the edge of the tarmac. No markings, no salutes, no ceremony, the way important things often ended. Before she left, Kira placed the rifle into its case and locked it. Not because she was done with it, but because she refused to let it define the next chapter. The world beyond the base felt wider, quieter, less certain. She traveled light, moved quietly, followed trails of information instead of footprints. Phantom Initiative didn't collapse overnight. It resisted, denied, adapted. But so did she. She learned to speak where silence had lived, to document instead of destroy, to let daylight do what bullets once had. Some nights were harder than others. Faces returned. Brennan, her father, names etched into memory deeper than stone. On those nights, she reminded herself why she kept going. Not for justice. Justice was too clean a word. For balance. The call came months later, routed through channels she no longer trusted, but listened to anyway. "They're standing down," the voice said. "Funding cut, operations frozen, not erased, but stopped." Kira closed her eyes. Stopped was enough. She returned to the memorial quietly. No cameras, no escort, just her and the names. She knelt and rested her hand against the stone. "I didn't fix it," she whispered, but I didn't let it keep growing. The wind stirred softly, as if answering in a language she didn't need to understand. As she stood to leave, she noticed something new. Another name had been added, fresh, sharp. Cole Brennan. She traced it once, only once. Some losses never shrink. They simply teach you how much room the heart can make. Months later, Kira sat at a long table in a quiet room, sunlight filtering through tall windows. Across from her sat people who listened differently, carefully, uncomfortably. She told the truth. Not all of it, but enough. When she finished, no one clapped. No one praised her bravery. That was fine. What mattered was that no one dismissed her. Afterward, a woman approached her in the hallway, older, steady, familiar eyes. "You didn't fire the last shot," the woman said. Kira met her gaze. "No." "Good," the woman replied. "The world has enough endings. It needs more interruptions." Kira smiled faintly. Later, far from bases and briefings, she found herself back at a range, civilian this time. Lena stood beside her, adjusting her stance. "Wind's changing," Lena said. "Yes," Kira replied. "What does that tell you?" "That I should wait." Kira nodded. They waited. No shot came. And that was the lesson. As the sun dipped low, Kira felt something settle inside her. Not closure, not peace. Alignment. She had been ignored, underestimated, used as a question mark others didn't want to answer. But she had answered anyway. Not with rage, not with spectacle, but with restraint, resolve, and a refusal to disappear. Because sometimes the strongest voice doesn't shout orders or demand recognition. Sometimes it chambers the truth, steadies itself, and chooses the moment that changes everything.